If Kim Jong Un destroyed North Korea's economy to keep COVID-19 out, will sanctions stop him from pursuing nuclear weapons? CNN, after arguably the most challenging year of his near-decade rule of North Korea, Kim Jong Un is sticking to his guns. Kim announced last week at the 8th Workers' Party Congress, a meeting for North Korea's governing elite, that his country plans to beef up Pyongyang's already dangerous nuclear weapons and ballistic missile programs with new sophisticated armament, such as tactical nuclear weapons designed for use on the battlefield and warheads designed to evade American-made missile defense system. At a parade marking the conclusion of the Congress, Kim's military shows off the new submarine-launched ballistic missile called SLBM. Kim's message was crystal clear. Right now, North Korea needs its nuclear weapons to deter the United States, no matter who is in power, he said, and no matter the cost. The young leader's ambitious plan for modernizing his nuclear arsenal will prove expensive at a time when money is already tight. North Korea voluntarily severed the last of its sent ties with the outside world in 2020 to prevent the influx of COVID-19. That included cutting off almost all trade with Beijing, an economic lifeline the impoverished country needs to keep its people from going hungry. North Korea's economy is now in the gutter, and its food supply is reportedly in peril. To ward off the pandemic, Kim effectively did his country what many in Washington hoped economic sanctions would go: bring the North Korean economy close to the brink of collapse. That he did it on his own volition has led many to question if sanctions ever be strong enough to change Kim's thinking. Some analysts disagree with the line of thinking. They see opportunity. With North Korea's economy already on the rope, they believe now is the time to deliver the knockout punch, a blow of crippling coercive measures that once and for all convinced Kim that his continued pursuit of nuclear weapons does not guarantee his regime's safety, it threatens it. Either way, Kim's plan will prove to be a major challenge for President-elect Joe Biden. Trump, like Obama and President George W. Bush, will leave his successor a more dangerous and better armed adversary than the one he inherited. Maximum pressure. Before Trump agreed to sit face to face with Kim in 2018, his administration put in the place an aptly named strategy called maximum pressure. The goal was to use sanctions, diplomacy, and other coercive measures short of armed conflict to convince Kim to agree to the conflict verifiable and irreversible dismantlement of its nuclear weapons and ballistic missile program. As North Korea tested missile and nuclear bombs at an unprecedented clip in 2017, the Trump administration turned up the heat. The U.S. mission to the United Nations successfully lobbied the UN Security Council to put in place a resolution that went after North Korea's ability to make money by selling regular goods such as coal and seafood. The Treasury Department used its tremendous power and influence over the global financial system to enact their own un- unilateral sanctions, and the diplomats successfully lobbied U.S. partners to close Pyongyang's embassies overseas, which the regime has been accused of using a front for money-making opportunities. By the end of 2017, North Korea was barred from almost all international trade. Even long-time North Korea ally China agreed to sign on to incredibly punitive, punitive UN sanctions that year, and Beijing appears to be enforcing them at first. That momentum didn't last, as Trump pivoted to diplomacy with Pyongyang in 2018. The United States took its foot off the gas on the pressure campaign. Hundreds of new sanctions that are ready to go were put on hold ahead of Trump's first summit with Kim in Singapore. The president said sanctions has been issued at a much slower clip since. As the threat subsided and its relationship with the United States crumbled, China began loosening its enforcement of restrictions, Washington alleged, though Beijing repeatedly denied any claims that it does not fully enforce UN sanctions. Many experts believe Washington gave up on maximum pressure too soon. Some, including former U.S. Acting Assistant Secretary of State for Eastern Asia and the Pacific, Ivan Rivera, argue Biden's team should seriously consider a new maximum pressure model, ramping up sanctions in ways that would impose even more pain and isolation on North Korea. Intensification of sanctions plus other diplomatic, economic, and banking and military pressures that you could apply on North Korea could certainly shake the regime's foundations, particularly now that we see that the regime is suffering a severe economic crisis, the likes of which we haven't seen in a while, Rivera said. Rivera and the other proponents of sanctions argue there is still tools left in the U.S. arsenal to pressure North Korea, and they should be pursued. The Biden administration could, for example, try harder to close North Korean trading companies in conjunction with U.S. allies and target Chinese banks that helps North Korea access foreign currency. There is much more to be done that could squeeze, isolate, and undermine North Korea in ways that would shake their confidence in their long-standing assumption that nuclear weapons are their salvation, and it would also drive the point home that not only are nuclear weapons not your salvation, they're the thing that has the potential to undermine the stability of your regime, Rivera said. Risky business. Rivera said he recognized that such a approach is risky. It could force North Koreans to choose between feeding its people and funding its nuclear weapons, and history shows Kim will likely choose the latter. Kim Jong Un, the current leader's father and predecessor, led millions die of starvation during a famine in the 1990s rather than reform, accept, add, or do anything that might have threatened his iron grip on leadership. Things are Things aren't that bad in North Korea right now, but analysts believe the economic situation is more there than it has been since the famine. Devastating storms, the punishing sanctions, and the pandemic reformed North Korea's economy in 2020. There appears to be enough food to go around, but the supply is under more strain than any time since the famine, according to Chad Okaro, the CEO of the Korea Risk Group, which produced North Korea publications NK Pro and NK News. We can safely say there are nationwide shortage of several key food items, he said. Though costly, Kim's decision to shut North Korea's borders appears to have worked from the public health perspective. North Korea's claim not to have contracted a single case of COVID-19 is likely untrue, but the country has not seemingly not experienced a severe wave of infections. A large number of cases would like overwhelm North Korea's dilapidated healthcare infrastructure, so Kim is unlikely to lift the border restriction till the pandemic subsides. That means Pyongyang will, in order to achieve its object, continue to inflict a level of economic pain upon itself. John Dery, a professor at Yonsei University's Graduate School of International Relations, said that should be a sobering reminder to the Biden administration that economic pressure does not work on North Korea. North Korea subjected itself to an even more extreme form of economic pain than sanctions to keep away COVID, and yet they are not buzzing, buzzing, buzzing on the nuclear thing, Dury said, getting everyone on the same page. Biden now faces the same foreign policy issue that has flooded his previous five predecessors. How to get the North Korea to give up its pursuit of nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles. He may be forced to do so sooner than he'd like. Though the new weapons Kim mentions are at various stages of development, most would, most would need to be test fired to be considered operational. If North Korea were to conduct such a test, it would likely set the stage for the diplomatic confrontation between Washington and Pyongyang in the first days of Biden's presidency. There are hints about how the new U.S. administration would approach that challenge. Based on his public remarks, Biden's strategy will likely involve a commitment to multilateral alliances. Biden's pick for Secretary of State is on the record saying Washington should look to the Iran deal for inspiration on how to deal with North Korea, meaning the new administration may consider something like trading a freeze in proliferations activities for limiting sanctions relief. But sources familiar with the transition said the incoming administration will take the time to flesh out the policy after meeting with allies and partners. Whatever path Biden chooses, major roadblocks remain. If, like his predecessor, Biden responded with sanctions and pressure, It might preclude the type of back-channel diplomacy used to set up the Iran deal. Pyongyang views sanctions as hostile acts and could in turn shut the door to talks with its typical bombastic language. North Korea refers to the last round of UN sanctions on it in 2017 as an act of war and called the idea that it would give up his nuclear weapons a US pipe dream. The strategy would also require the buy-in from three uneasy players: China, Russia, and South Korea. China and Russia will not fully enforce even existing sanctions, said Do Young Kim, an adjunct senior fellow at the Center of the New American Security. Geopolitically, it would be difficult to designate new sanctions without a very convincing rationale for Beijing, Moscow, and even South Korea's Moon government. China and Russia appear content with the status quo. South Korean President Moon Jae-in may not be on board with the pressure strategy because he favors engagement and economic cooperation as means of lowering the temperature. Moon said that dialogue and mutually beneficial cooperation are key to Korean peace process in a speech earlier this month. If dialogue is the path chosen, the Biden administration must recognize its limit, said Drury. We should moderate our expectations of what engagement can do, he said. We've seen what three summits can do, and it leaves a lot of to be desired. But the biggest issues might simply be bandwidth. Bandwidth. Biden comes into office facing incredibly daunting challenges at home. He must stop the COVID-19 pandemic raging within the United States' own borders, heal wounded nations still recovering after Trump incited a mob of insurrectionists stormed the U.S. Capitol and get his cabinet approved by the Senate, which must try Trump after his impeachment on charges of insurrections. How do you deal with this North Korea challenge and deal with all these other things at the same time? Revere said, "This is hard, but there's extremely capable people." CNN's Carly Atwood and Jack Kwan contributed reporting.